Tololoche strings. Today we're going to do a tutorial on how to switch out your Tololoche strings. I'm going to show you the two different strings that I've used, the Celine Contrabajo silk wrapped in nylon entorchadas strings that are supposed to be tuned in mi, and then also the Bassworks superior nylon weed whacker type strings that are actually supposed to be tuned in la. So I'm going to show you the differences between how they're supposed to be changed out, which ones I prefer, and a little bit of information about strings so I can make it easier for you guys to change them out, because it's kind of hard to find tutorials online. I haven't found any myself, so let's go ahead and go through them. Alright, so first of all, here with these superior strings, I have them tuned in A standard or La standard. So what that means is if I turn on my tuner I have here on the bridge, when I play this lowest note, it should be tuned to an A. Now as you can see, this is actually tuned to G sharp. It's a half step below A, because these strings, even though I had them on my old upright bass and they had stretched out, they're still stretching and still tend to fall out of tune. But I also think that might have to do with the way that I strung them. So I'll show that in a second. But it should be tuned to A as the lowest note, and the next note should be D. The next one would be G, and then the last string should be C. They're all tuned a fourth apart. It's the same thing as if you had the A string from a regular bajo and down, you're tuning in fourths apart, and that we're just going 4 notes higher than regular bass tuning. So the tension is a bit higher for these strings, and that makes it a bit easier to slap with this type of string. If we were to tune this down to E, you would see that I would go back from A all the way down to the G, and down to F, and all the way down from F sharp to E, which is very, very low with these strings. And so that's why it's a little rough to tune these strings to E standard, because you can barely hear the note. If I play that, you can kind of hear it, and it makes it really easy to slap, but the note itself is not clean, and the tension is so low that it's not ideal, and it's not that great on the actual Tololoche as well. So that's why these ones are supposed to be tuned in A rather than in E like a normal bass. Whereas the other Celine ones we can actually tune to E, and I will show you that once we switch it. If we were to tune those to A, we would go way too high, and it might potentially break or even mess up our Tololoche. It might rip the strings, so keep that in mind. Make sure to check the package. I know for a fact the Celine Contrabajo ones said to tune in Mi in the back, and the Basswork ones didn't really specify, but I had them initially in E. I realized it was way too low. It was really nice to slap, but it wasn't getting a good sound, and it was having a hard time staying in tune as well. So keep that in mind depending on which kind of strings you're going to go for. But we're going to take off these strings and we're going to put on the next ones. The first thing you have to remember is that we don't want to take off all the strings at once. We want to maintain some sort of tension on the bridge so that it can stay aligned properly, and so the sound post on the inside of the Tololoche that's being held together by that tension doesn't fall over, because if it falls over, it's really hard to get back in position. You need a special tool to maneuver in through these F-holes, and you'll probably have to take it somewhere to get it repaired. So try to keep on at least 2 strings at a time and do it in pairs. So we're going to take off this string and this string, the thickest strings here, and then we're going to restring it, and once that's up to tension and back up to pitch, we're going to switch and do the other 2. Alright, so let's start that process now. So this is a few days later. I'm editing the video and I'm looking back at some of the things I said at the start, and I forgot to mention that it's a really good idea to restring your tolo laying down so the sound post doesn't fall, and so the puente can stay upright. And also you might want to try to mark out where your bridge is initially before you switch the strings, because it might shift when you're tuning it. It might move, it might tilt, and I realized my puente was starting to tilt because I was tightening it too far. It was sliding out of place and I had to adjust it. And you want to make sure that it's making direct contact and it's not lifting on one side, it's not lopsided. And if you don't want to mark it with Sharpie, I marked it with Sharpie, but you could use tape if you want. You could use stickers to align it, whatever, even like Expo if you'd like. But if you have a really expensive tolo, if you have like an upright with a really nice finish, you might not want to put Sharpie. But mine, I just put Sharpie on it because I was like, I want this to be marked, I want this to stay there forever. That's where it's supposed to be. Should be in line with the F-holes. It should be pretty much upright, and you're going to want to align it so that it's right with the diapason, so that's in the right spot. It's not too far to the right, it's not too far to the left. That's gonna pull the strings out of line with the nut slots, and that's gonna make it so that the tuning is not very good. So some things to keep in mind at the start, just to make sure it's a good experience for you guys. Cool, let's keep going. So before we take off the strings, you're gonna want to take note of the route that your strings are taking and where they're ending up on the posts. You can see here that I have it very messy because I actually wound these in a not ideal way, but I did it because these strings were so hard to hold and so hard to get to go to the right place that I just put all of the string in and took out all of the extra tension and just let it with this extra slack. You'll see a lot of people with their tolos this way. I don't think it's ideal because I feel like it affects the intonation and the notes fall out of tune very easily. But at the end of the day, what we want to remember is when we're restringing these, we want to string the outside string first because it's going to go under the string next to it. So when we take out these two strings, we're going to take them both off, but we're going to wind the E string first, or our thickest string, and then we'll wind the second string on the inside because it's going to go over it. And we're going to want to do this one in a way that it doesn't get in the way of our second string. So we're going to start, just to keep it in mind, we're going to try to wind some excess to the right side or the opposite side of where our peg is, and then we're going to finish off with these extra winds close to the left side where it's supposed to end up, so it's out of the way of all the other strings. You can see here that I actually didn't do that for the A string or our second string here, and it went underneath and it kind of gets in the way of the other pegs. So keep that in mind, but let's go ahead and take off these first two strings, and then I'm going to show you how we can tune it ideally for the best intonation and so that we don't have this ugly extra slack all in the way. So let's get it. Alright, so I took off the other two strings and now we got to loop these ones, and these ones are a loop end instead of a plastic end like the
superior.
So instead of having the ball end to hold it in, we have to loop it through itself. And the silk sometimes is a little hard to get through, especially because the tip of the string is usually pretty frayed, or it's a little rough and it's kind of hard to get it through the hole. So we can use something like a screwdriver or like a wooden pencil or something to help open it up. But what we want to keep in mind is we want the string to go through the bottom of the hole, go over and out, and come through our loop. So we want our loop to stay here, and we want to put the end of the string through the bottom of the hole like this. So this end will go up here and it'll go all the way through. And some people put a towel or something underneath so they don't scratch it. I don't really care that much, but this is essentially what we want to do. And then we want to get the tip of the string. These ones are all wrinkled up because I already had these on the Tololoche before, but we're going to try to put this through there, and once we tighten it up, that's what's going to hold it in place. So this is where I would get like a screwdriver or something to try to get through that hole there and open it up, and then that way we can slide the string in through there. It's still a little tough, but that's essentially what we want to do. And to be honest, if it rips through the silk, I hope it doesn't have an issue, but at least it gets it through. So now we do that, and now when we pull it through and tighten it, it's going to end up just like this. And with more and more tension, it's going to lock it in place, and eventually it'll be all good to go, just like that. So I'm going to do that for this one and then the other one, and then we'll show the process for winding them up. Okay, so now comes the hard part. This is the part that I struggled with a lot, especially with the slick strings. But to avoid having all that excess and making sure we have good intonation and there's enough string in there, we're gonna put the string in. I like to have it facing the top so I can put it in easily. And then when we put it through, we'll start to turn it away from the post. We're gonna want to wind it away from the other parts of the Tololoche. And as it starts to poke through around the other side, we can start to see how much slack we can get. Now that part's gonna rub up against the wood and it's gonna rotate, and even if there's a lot of it, it's gonna get through no matter what. So what we want to do at this point is, now that we have it kind of locked in, we're gonna want to try to pull it with tension and kind of lock it in place like this. And I really like using an electric tool like this. This Ernie Ball one's like 20 bucks on Amazon. And we're gonna lock it into our place, and we're gonna start to wind it. And like I said, we're gonna want to try to get 2 to 3 winds towards the opposite side to take out some extra slack. and then afterwards wrap it around towards the side that it's actually on. So for the E string, it's on the left side. So we're gonna finish our winds over here so that the string ends up on the left side. So let's see how that looks. Let's see if I can get it. It's a little hard sometimes, but you're gonna want to try to guide it and move little by little as needed. But you'll see it'll start to slip out and it'll be a little tough. So try your best to get it best as you can. And keep winding until it almost ends up against the wall on the other side. And after we've gotten those 2-3 winds all the way over there, then I can wrap around to this side now. And that will help me lock the string in place, and I can start to wind towards the post it's supposed to be on. And as my string comes up to tension, I'm going to want to make sure that it ends up on my puente post and it actually locks into place, or else it might start to tighten up and it'll be out of position and it could mess up the bridge. So make sure to watch that too behind you. I'm going to start winding and winding. And now it's being held in by the A string slot, but I don't want it to end up there. I want to make sure over here that it actually goes into the slot. So keep on winding it. Starting to cut up the tension now. Kind of overlapping my winds a little bit, but I think that's alright. Kind of running out of battery here, so I'm gonna start doing it more by hand. But it is in my slot, and the puente is locked into place. Starting to get a note, and this is where you can turn on your tuner. Take this off here. You can start seeing the note that we get. If it's too low, we're not going to get a note, so we're going to keep turning. There's F, F sharp, so that's too far. We're going to go back a little bit. E, somewhere on there, perfect. It's going to stretch, it's going to settle, but we got that one good. And always come back here too and make sure that it's tight and good in place. And like I said, you want to make sure it lands in that slot. But right there, it loosened a little bit because of that change that I did. But here we go, we got E. So that's pretty good. It's somewhere in the range. I'm not going to try to make it stay in tune right now. That's perfectly fine. But that's basically how we're going to do it. And now, since this one ended up on the right side, I can safely do my A string over here. Now it's going to be rough because this string I messed up too and I didn't get it out of the way, but hopefully I can still do it. And now that I have tension with this string, maybe I can loosen up this guy and move it out of the way. So we're going to do that. But yeah. Alright, so as you can see, I got the mi string and the la string, and you see how the la string or the second string goes over the first one. So, and we ended up on the side over here. Same thing is going to be on this side. We got our re string is going to go to the back and it's going to go above the hole for our sol string. So we're going to want to do the sol string first, wind it all underneath, and then the re string will go over it, and that's the last one we're going to do. So I'll put this one to the side for now, and always make sure in the back where the puente is that your string is lining up and it's going to stay in there, because if you start to tighten it up and it's not in the slot, it could damage your guitar or your todo, sorry, and it could mess things up. So just try to keep that in mind. More so when you're finally coming up to pitch, when you're starting to take all the slack out. But for now, let's do that. I'm gonna speed it up as well because this is getting really long. And also remember, we're gonna do the opposite side now. So because our peg is on the right side, we're gonna do our extra slack winds to the left. It's gonna go underneath here, and after we get as much slack out of the string as possible, we're going to wrap it and secure the string in place here and finish our winds on the right side. And it's gonna be as close to the wall as possible so it's not in the way of our other strings. All right, let's get it. Alright, so we got our sole string in, beautifully wound. That was the easiest one because it's the thinnest and because you can get a good grip on these strings compared to the bass works. That one is really easy. But one thing I also want to mention is a lot of people tend to recommend you put pencil lead or some sort of graphite in the nut slot and in the bridge slot, but I don't think it's that important for nylon strings. I think it's more so for metal strings, so it has a better slide, and so it doesn't have so much friction when it's tuning and when it's moving. But with these strings, I don't think it's that much of an issue, and I never really notice a difference when I have it and when I don't. So if you want to, you can go ahead and just rub a number 2 pencil in there, but I don't think it really makes a difference. So I'm gonna do the last string really quick, tune it up, and then we're gonna see how it sounds. Oh my god, dude, my wrist. I'm so glad I have this thing. But Big Tree, if you're watching this, he broke this because I lent it to him. Batteries always come out, even with tape. I probably should fix it, but or just get a new one. Yeah, try to get one of those or else you're gonna struggle and it's gonna suck. But that's how it is. You see how we locked in the string there with that extra tension? We did it for all of them, and it looks a lot cleaner than it did before. We got all of our strings here in the post. So now it's gonna be a long process, especially if they're new strings. Of tuning them up and stretching them out. Also want to remember to move these up. Make sure, get them nice and tight. Right there. Can tune them up all up to pitch. And then you're gonna wait. It's gonna go out of tune for probably a week, maybe even 2 weeks. If you play it and play it, it's gonna keep stretching and it's gonna keep getting out of tune. But that's basically the entire process of switching the todo strings. So I really prefer these ones. I like tuning these ones in me because it does give it a nice, still a good amount of tension, but a nice elasticity so I can still get a good slap out of it. And please keep in mind that you do not want to over tighten your strings. I made the big mistake of doing that, and I had tightened them and tightened them and tightened them, and it was still sounding too low. It was falling out of tune. So I continued, maybe I gotta go to the next mi. If you do that, it's gonna start to dig your bridge into your tapa. It's gonna start to tilt your puente. I was tuning it and tuning it, and I was trying to get them high enough, and even the high strings just still did not sound right. So I kept going, and once I realized that, I looked down at the bridge, it was tilted literally like halfway this way. This half of the bridge was up and it was not touching the tapa. You do not want to do that, believe me. Some people will tell you tune up to the next mi. Someone commented on one of my TikToks saying that, and I do not believe that that is the way to go. These strings are supposed to be tuned to a certain E, so please do not go too high. If you want to try going, if this E is too low and you want to try going up to the next A, you can try it, but please be careful because it might break your tolo, it might break your bridge, and that might be the reason why this tolo got broken and the entire thing exploded. They might have exerted too much pressure on it. You might mess up the bridge, you might mess up the tailpiece, you might snap the neck. You really want to be careful with that. So right now I have this one tuned it is saying that it's an E. It's a pretty good note. It sounds pretty decent. My A is also probably still stretching, but I'll play that one. We have that A. We have C sharp. This is supposed to be a D, so it fell a little bit back. We gotta tighten it a little bit. Right there. Just a tiny bit more. And then G. Yeah, so you guys get the idea. Just a word of advice, just a warning. Please be careful. I don't want you guys to mess up your really expensive instruments trying to go higher than you're supposed to, because it's gonna have way too much tension. It's gonna be so hard to slap. So if you're having issues and you're still not getting the right sound, there might be something else in play. It might be the way that you strung them. It might be your nut is too low. It might be that you need to shave down your diapason. There's a lot of things that it could be. So hopefully this video is helpful for you guys. Please be careful and please try to do your research. I've looked all over to try to figure out how to do this correctly. I've looked at upright bass restringings. I've looked at trying to find Tololoche tutorials, but this is, from my experience, changing these strings about 2 or 3 times, watching a bunch of videos on upright restringing, and just experience. So try to be careful. It's not that difficult. You can do it if you're careful. Just please make sure to be aware of the risks, and good luck. If you guys have any questions, feel free to message me. I'll help you out with whatever you need. And if you guys want to take lessons, whatever instrument, let me know. Thanks. Alright, so now we're all good. We're all tuned up. This is a little sound test to see how it sounds. It's our mi, our la, our re, our sol. It does have a little bit of a buzz. That could be another issue with my instrument. This is an old tolo and it was repaired, so it might have some other issues. That buzz and that lowness was what made me decide to tune up to the next mi. And I remember distinctly tuning and tuning and tuning, and it was so hard. There was so much resistance, but I eventually got up to mi and I kept it there, and it sounded a bit better, but I can imagine that it probably was not good on my instrument. So we'll see. I'm gonna mess with it some more and see what happens, but that's how you change the strings. Hopefully it goes better for you guys. Hopefully your instruments are good and they sound great, but there you go.